There are stories so dark, so painful that they whisper through the winds long after they have ended. Some are forgotten, some are silenced, but not this one. This one ignited a fire, one that lit up every corner of India, a blaze that screamed for justice. Today, we are not just telling a story. We are diving into the deepest depths of cruelty, cover-ups, and caste prejudice that led to the death of a 19-year-old Dalit girl in Hathras 4 years ago this very month. This is a story of betrayal, not just by the perpetrators, but by the very system meant to protect her. Welcome to Crime Crave. Today, we bring you the chilling case of Hathras. I'm your narrator Momo, and this is a tale that India will never forget. Before we dive into this powerful and emotional story, make sure to subscribe to Crime Crave and hit that notification bell. A day like any other until it wasn't. It was the kind of day that felt ordinary, just like any other. The warm September sun bathed the small village of Hathras in Uttar Pradesh, in fields where the earth smelled rich and alive. A 19-year-old girl set out to do what she had done hundreds of times before: collect cattle fodder. For her, it was just another day. For her family, it was the usual rhythm of rural life. But little did they know, she was walking into a nightmare. A nightmare that would forever scar not just her family, but the entire nation. She didn't come home that afternoon. And when her mother went to find her, what she found instead was a scene of absolute horror. The girl was lying still, her face twisted in agony, her body broken. 4 men had waited for her that day: Sandeep, Ramu, Lavkush, and Ravi. They dragged her by her dupatta, strangling her, snapping her spinal cord, leaving her paralyzed on the ground. In that moment, all her mother could feel was helplessness. A helplessness that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Can you imagine the anguish of seeing your child like that? Her daughter, her life, lay there on the cold earth, unable to scream for help. Her body no longer her own. In that silence, time must have felt like it was standing still. But this was only the beginning. She survived the unimaginable. But what came after was a nightmare in its own right. Ready to walk in her shoes? The horrors this young girl faced didn't end in the fields. No. What came after the attack was something almost unimaginable. She was found lying on the ground, her body barely holding on, broken in ways that no human body should ever have to endure. Her tongue was bloodied and torn, the result of her desperate attempt to fight back. But the real damage, it was buried deep inside, both in her body and her spirit. The attack had left her paralyzed, her spinal cord snapped, destroyed, left her unable to move, unable to even call out for help. Her body no longer obeyed her. Her thoughts raced, her heart pounded, but her limbs were like stone, refusing to move. In those moments, she must have wondered if she would ever be able to walk again, to stand on her own 2 feet. But even more terrifying than the physical pain was the knowledge that she couldn't stop what was happening to her. She could feel every touch, every moment of violence, but she couldn't fight back. The girl's neck was deeply bruised from where her attackers had used her own dupatta to strangle her. Her body, though still alive, was shutting down piece by piece. She couldn't even cry out in pain, her voice silenced by the trauma her body had endured. She bit down hard in her struggle, so hard that she tore off part of her own tongue, and the pain was searing through her. But it was nothing compared to the anguish of realizing that no one was coming to save her. Her vision must have blurred as her breathing grew shallow. She lay in that field, feeling the weight of the earth beneath her and the sky above her, wondering if this was where it all would end. The world around her must have felt both too far away and too close, trapping her in a nightmare she couldn't escape. The sun that had been warm just hours earlier now felt cold, indifferent, as it sank lower in the sky. In those moments, paralyzed and alone, her mind must have raced, flashing back to her life, her family, everything she might lose. Her future stolen, her body broken, her voice silenced. And as the minutes crawled by, it wasn't just her body that was dying. It was her spirit, her hope that was being ripped away. The realization that this was not just an attack on her body, but on her very existence must have weighed heavily on her. By the time her mother found her, the girl was barely clinging to life. Her eyes were open but distant, staring at something far beyond the horizon, something only she could see. Her lips, still trembling from the pain, couldn't form words. All she could do was lie there as her mother knelt by her side, crying for the daughter she couldn't help. What happens when the people meant to deliver justice turn a blind eye? Next, we'll uncover the horrifying inaction of the authorities. Stay tuned. The mom rushed her child to the local police, desperate for them to act, to catch those responsible. But when they arrived at the Chandpa police station, instead of urgency, they were met with cold indifference. The officers barely looked up. The SHO, D.K. Verma, dismissed the family's claims. It was as though their pain was invisible, their cries for justice unheard. For 10 agonizing days, the police refused to file a proper complaint. 10 days in which the girl's attackers roamed free, untouched by the law. And what about her? She lay in a hospital bed, paralyzed but still fighting. Fighting not just for her life, but to be heard. Finally, on September 22nd, they recorded her statement. In that moment, as she struggled to breathe, she named her attackers: Sandeep, Ramu, Lavkush, and Ravi. But those names didn't matter to the police, not then. Because in the world of Hathras, she wasn't just a girl, she was a Dalit. And in a country where caste can mean everything, her life was already weighed, already deemed less worthy. She fought for her life while her family fought for justice. But neither knew the darkest betrayal was yet to come. The girl's condition was worsening. Her family fought to get her the care she needed, moving her from one hospital to another. They watched helplessly as her body failed her, as the injuries from the brutal day tightened their grip. On September 29th, just 2 weeks after the attack, she took her last breath in Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi. But her death, her suffering, none of it ended there. In fact, what followed next shocked an entire nation. The police didn't give the family a moment to grieve, to mourn, to say goodbye. At 2:30 in the morning, the Uttar Pradesh police forcibly cremated her body. Her family, locked inside their home, could do nothing but weep. No last rites, no funeral, no dignity. It was as if they wanted to erase her, to silence her completely, even in death. They claimed they had the family's consent, but the video footage told a different story, a story of lies and betrayal. Outrage filled the streets, but behind the scenes, powerful forces were twisting the truth. Was justice even a possibility? When news of the forced cremation hit the headlines, it was like a match struck on a dry kindling. Social media erupted, streets filled with protesters. People from all over India demanded answers and demanded justice. From New Delhi to Mumbai, from the poorest villages to the largest cities, the call was clear: justice for Hathras. But the government had a different story to tell. According to them, the girl wasn't beeped. A forensic report surfaced claiming no traces of sperm were found. She wasn't beeped. Police insisted. But for the public, this was just another cover-up, another attempt to bury the truth along with her body. Critics pointed out that the absence of sperm didn't mean the absence of beep. According to forensic guidelines, sperm can only be detected within the first 3 days after an assault. By the time the samples were taken, it was too late. So why then was the narrative shifting? Why was the government more interested in protecting its image than protecting its people? The caste dynamics at play were undeniable. A Dalit girl attacked by 4 upper caste men. Was this just another story of power crushing the powerless? But would justice ever truly be served? In the next section, we examine the legal battle that left the family without closure. In the end, the Uttar Pradesh government handed the case over to the Central Bureau of Investigation, or the CBI. But the family wasn't convinced. They didn't want a CBI probe. They wanted a judicial investigation. They wanted real justice, not more delays. Months turned into years. The legal process dragged on. And then, on March 2nd, 2023, a verdict was finally delivered. Out of the 4 accused, 3, Ramu, Lavkush, and Ravi, were acquitted. The court claimed there wasn't enough evidence to prove they were at the scene. The 4th man, Sandeep Thakur, was convicted, but not for beep, not for murder. Instead, he was found guilty of culpable homicide, not amounting to murder, sentenced to life in prison. For the family, this was no victory. Their daughter was dead. The men they believed responsible were free. And the one who was convicted, he didn't face the charges they had hoped for. This case wasn't just about one girl. It was a larger, deeply rooted problem. Next, we uncover how the caste system played a chilling role in her death. In India, the fight for justice is never just about one person. It's about systems, centuries of oppression, and deep-rooted prejudices. The Hathras case wasn't just about the brutal assault of one Dalit girl. It was about every girl, every woman, every marginalized person in India who has been told their life is worthless. The caste system is a shadow that lingers over every part of life in India, in the villages, in the cities, in the police stations, and the courts. It decides who gets justice and who is denied it. And this case was a reminder that the shadow is long, dark, and dangerous. But stories like Hathras also show us something else: resilience. The girl's family, despite the threats, the lies, and the betrayals, never stopped fighting. And across the country, people continued to raise their voices louder and louder, refusing to let her story be forgotten. Protests swept through the streets, the cries for justice echoing across cities and villages alike. It wasn't just about this girl anymore. It was about every Dalit woman, every marginalized community that had been silenced for centuries. In a country where caste is often an unspoken force, the Hathras case forced it into the open, where everyone could see the side of its cruel grip. And yet, for every voice that cried out for justice, there were those who sought to silence them. The state's reaction wasn't just to defend the accused. It was to accuse the victim's family, to question the very fabric of their story. The family, still mourning their daughter, faced a new battle, this time against the very forces that should have stood by their side. They were harassed, silenced, pressured to change their story. In one chilling video, the Hathras district magistrate was caught warning the family, telling them not to ruin their credibility, and that the media would soon move on. It was as if they were being told to bury their daughter's truth along with her body. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. Across India, people refuse to stay silent. For many, the Hathras case became a symbol for ongoing struggle for justice, not just for Dalits, but for all those who have been pushed to the margins of society. It highlighted the deep flaws in a system where power and privilege often determine who gets to speak and who gets silenced. This case wasn't just about punishing the perpetrators. It was about uprooting centuries of oppression, about holding a mirror to the face of a society that still allows such horrors to happen. The girls' fight for justice became a fight for all of India, a fight against the systematic forces of caste and privilege that continue to claim lives unchecked and unpunished. But the question remains, will the fight ever end? Or is the shadow of caste too deeply woven into the fabric of the nation? What do you think? Was justice really served? Or is this yet another example of the long road ahead for true justice? Do you think the justice system can truly serve the marginalized? What changes do you think are needed? Comment your thoughts below. If you found this case as haunting and heartbreaking as we did, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more. We are here to bring you the stories that need to be told, the ones that shake your conscience, the ones that refused to be silenced. This is Crime Crane, and we'll see you in the next episode.